The moment I walked through the door, I knew something was off. It wasn't anything obvious. The house looked the same, dinner was on the stove, and there was Liz, my wife of 8 years, chopping vegetables. But it was in her eyes, that quick flicker of what? Guilt? Nervousness? She smiled, but it didn't reach those eyes, the ones I thought I knew better than my own. Hey hun, how was your day? Her voice was too casual, her smile a bit too stretched. Same old, I replied, dropping my keys in the bowl. But my mind was racing. This wasn't the Liz I knew, she was always an open book. Now it felt like a page had been torn out, a secret scribbled in invisible ink. I decided to shrug it off. Maybe she had a bad day, or maybe I was just reading too much into things. We sat down for dinner, chatting about mundane stuff, but the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. It was like a puzzle missing a crucial piece. Then, out of the blue, as we were clearing the dishes, she said it. Tom, what would you think about an open marriage? I froze, a plate in my hand. What? That word hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. She started talking fast about freedom, exploration, new experiences, but all I could hear was the thudding of my heart in my ears. Open marriage. Was this why she had been acting so strange? My Liz, the woman who used to joke about how she could never share her favorite ice cream, let alone her husband. I tried to keep my voice steady. Is this something you really want? She hesitated, then nodded, not meeting my eyes. I think it could be good for us. Us? The word felt like a slap. There was no us in what she was proposing. It was then I knew. This wasn't just a random idea. This had to be about someone else. Someone specific. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed proof. Let's think about it, I said, my mind already racing with suspicion. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. My wife, the love of my life, was next to me, yet a million miles away. My heart was a mix of hurt, confusion, and rising anger. I needed to know the truth, and I was going to find it no matter what it took. As the silence of the night engulfed us, I made a decision. I would hire a private investigator. I needed to confirm my doubts, to see the reality I was being shielded from. Little did I know, that decision would unravel everything we had built together. But at that moment, all I could think of was that I needed to know. I had to find out who was the man stealing my wife's glances, the one who had turned our lives upside down with just an idea. Never thought I'd be the guy sitting in a dimly lit office across from a private eye, feeling like a character out of a noir film. But here I was, handing over a photo of Liz, my wife, to a guy named Jack Sloan. I keep it discreet, I told him, my voice a mix of determination and disbelief. I just need to know if there's someone else. Jack, a man with more lines on his face than my old leather jacket, nodded solemnly. I'll find out what's going on, Mr. Carter. Discretion is my middle name. I left his office with a heavy heart. This wasn't me, I wasn't a doubter, a spy. But Liz's proposal of an open marriage had hit like a sucker punch, and now suspicion was my constant companion. The next few days were a blur of normalcy on the surface, with an undercurrent of anxiety. I went to work, came home, shared meals with Liz, all the while wondering what Jack was uncovering. Then came the call. Mr. Carter, we need to talk. Jack's gravelly voice was grim. We met in a quiet corner of a rundown coffee shop, away from prying eyes. He slid a folder across the table, his expression unreadable. I followed your wife, he began, and she's definitely not alone in this. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. There they were. Pictures of Liz with my best friend, Mike. Laughing together, holding hands, an intimacy that struck like a lightning bolt. Mike, my buddy since college, the best man at our wedding. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Jack continued, detailing their meetings, their routines, how they seemed to be careful but not careful enough. Each word was a hammer to my heart. The coffee shop faded around me. I was vaguely aware of Jack talking about his fees, about keeping me updated, but the roaring in my ears drowned out the words. I stumbled out of the coffee shop. The pictures from the folder burned into my brain. Liz and Mike, Mike and Liz, the world had tilted and I couldn't find my footing. The drive home was automatic. I sat in our driveway, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process the hurricane of emotions, anger, grief, disbelief. Liz greeted me with her usual smile as I walked in. How could she smile? How could she stand there like our world wasn't crumbling? Dinner will be ready soon, she said cheerfully. I managed a nod, locking away the storm inside me. I needed time, a plan. Confronting her now wouldn't do any good. I had to think, had to strategize. That night, as I lay next to her, pretending to be asleep, I realized the depth of her deception. It wasn't just about her and Mike. It was about all the years, all the memories, all the trust that had been shattered. I knew then that this wasn't just about catching a cheating wife. It was about confronting a betrayal that went to the very core of my life. And I was determined to face it head on. But not yet. First, I needed to gather all the pieces of this painful puzzle. Only then could I confront Liz and Mike together. Sitting across from Liz at dinner, I felt like an actor in some twisted play. The evidence was there, burning a hole in my pocket, yet I chose to wear a mask. Sure, let's try this open marriage thing, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Liz's eyes, usually so full of life, flickered with a mixture of surprise and was it relief? Really? She asked, her fork pausing mid-air. Yeah, why not? My voice was steady, but inside I was a storm of rage and heartache. It was a bizarre game of pretend. Here I was, agreeing to something that went against every fiber of my being. But this charade was necessary. I needed more evidence, something concrete before I could confront her and Mike. The days that followed were a masterclass in deception. I kept my agony hidden, wearing a smile like a shield. Liz seemed more relaxed, her laughter a little too loud, her glances a little too fleeting. Meanwhile, Jack, my private investigator, was my eyes and ears in the shadows. His updates were regular, photos, locations, times. With each new piece of evidence, my resolve hardened. One evening, as I sat in my car, waiting for Jack to hand over the latest batch of photos, I realized how far I had drifted from the man I once was. The man who believed in love, trust, and friendship was now spying on his own wife. Jack tapped on the window, his face grim as he handed me the envelope. You sure you want to keep doing this? He asked, a hint of concern in his voice. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The photos were a visual confirmation of the lies, Liz and Mike together, looking like a couple right out of a romance novel. I drove home in silence, the weight of betrayal heavy on my shoulders. At home, Liz was her usual self, talking about her day, her plans with her friends. I listened, nodding at the right moments, while my mind screamed with the knowledge of her lies. The confrontation was inevitable, but not yet. I needed to plan it out, to ensure that when the truth came out it was irrefutable. I needed them to know that I knew, to see the look in their eyes when they realized they had been caught. Sleep was elusive those nights. I lay next to Liz, feeling like a stranger in my own bed. My heart ached for what we had, for the love that I thought was unbreakable. Each day I played my part, smiling and nodding while inside, I was preparing for the day when the masks would fall off. The day when the truth would come out in the harshest light. I knew that day was coming soon, and it filled me with a dread and a burning desire for justice. The stage was set, the actors in place, and soon the final act would begin. The plan was simple, yet every part of it screamed against the grain of who I was. But then, wasn't everything about the situation against the grain? I was going to reveal Liz's affair, not quietly, not in the shadows where it had been hidden, but in the full, glaring light of day with an audience. It was theatrical, maybe even petty, but it was the only way I could think of to shake her out of this deceitful reverie. I sent out invitations for a special announcement at our home. Friends, family, colleagues, the whole gamut. A surprise for Liz, I said. The irony wasn't lost on me. Then came the cameras. I installed them myself, hidden in plain sight around the living room. These electronic eyes would capture everything. The shock, the confrontation, the raw, unfiltered truth. As the day approached, my house felt more like a stage than a home. I was the director of a play I never wanted to write, let alone star in. Liz was oblivious, caught up in the excitement of whatever tale I had spun about the gathering. Her smiles, once my source of joy, now were a painful reminder of the chasm between us. The day arrived, sunny and mocking in its normalcy. Guests began to trickle in, their laughter and chatter a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. Liz was radiant, playing the perfect hostess, floating among our guests, her laughter ringing clear. And there was Mike too, my best friend, mingling with a smile plastered on his face. As the room filled, my heart pounded like a drum in my chest. This was it, the moment of truth. I clinked my glass, calling for attention. The room hushed, expectant faces turning towards me. Liz stood beside me, her hand in mine, squeezing it in anticipation. "Thank you everyone for coming," I began, my voice steady despite the tempest inside. "I've gathered you all here for a special announcement." Liz's smile was wide, her eyes sparkling. She had no idea. I paused, taking a deep breath. This was the point of no return. "The truth is," I continued, "there's been something going on that everyone should know about." You could feel the shift in the room, the air heavy with sudden tension. I turned to Liz, her hand still in mine, and locked eyes with her. "Liz has been having an affair with Mike." The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Liz's face drained of color, her eyes widening in shock and fear. Mike, standing among the crowd, looked like he had been punched in the gut. I pulled out my phone, showing the room the pictures Jack had taken, the evidence of their betrayal. The room erupted in whispers and murmurs, a cacophony of disbelief and shock. Liz tried to speak, to explain, but her words were lost in the chaos. Mike was motionless, his expression one of defeat. As the reality of the situation settled in, the room divided, some comforting Liz, others shaking their heads in disbelief. I stood there, the eye of the storm, feeling a strange mix of relief and profound sorrow. The cameras captured it all, every second of the painful truth. This was the end of the pretense, the end of the lies. The curtain had fallen, and the show was over. As our living room filled with the hum of arriving guests, each handshake and hug felt like a scene from a play where I knew the climax but had to keep the script hidden. Friends, family, colleagues, they all streamed in, unaware of the storm that was about to break. Among them was Mike, smiling, unsuspecting, just another guest. I played the gracious host, my stomach churning with every forced smile. Liz was radiant, fluttering from group to group, the picture of innocence. Watching her, a part of me ached for the illusion we had lived in. Then came the moment, the point of no return. I tapped my glass, calling for quiet. The room settled, a sea of faces turning towards me, expectant. Liz stood by my side, squeezing my hand, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Thanks for coming, everyone," I began, my voice steady. "I have something important to share." You could hear a pin drop. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. "Liz and we've been through a lot together. But today, I need to share the truth about something that's been happening. Something that affects us all." Liz's grip tightened, a silent question in her eyes. I turned to face her, the pain in my chest a tangible thing. "Liz has been having an affair." The words hung in the air, stark and brutal. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Liz's face went pale, her eyes widening in shock and betrayal. Beside her, Mike's facade crumbled, his expression one of shock and guilt. "But don't just take my word for it," I continued, pulling out my phone. "See for yourselves." I connected my phone to the projector. Images and videos flickered to life on the wall. Liz and Mike together, their intimacy undeniable. The room erupted into chaos, a cacophony of disbelief and shock. Liz turned to me, her face a mask of horror and regret. "Tommy," she began, but her words were drowned out by the reactions of our friends and family. The truth was out, raw and unfiltered. People were talking, arguing, some trying to console Liz, others looking at me with a mix of sympathy and respect for my courage. In the midst of the turmoil, I stood there numb. The truth had been revealed, but there was no triumph in it, only a profound sense of loss and betrayal. Liz was crying now, her sobs a soundtrack to the shattering of our life together. Mike was nowhere to be seen, having slipped away in the chaos. As the evening wore on, the guests began to leave, casting glances full of pity and disbelief. The party was over, the guests gone, but the aftermath of the revelation lingered like a bad taste. I sat there long after everyone had left, the silence of the house echoing around me. The truth was out, but at what cost? My marriage was over, my best friend was gone, and all that was left was the wreckage of what I once thought was a perfect life. The room was still spinning from the bomb I just dropped. Liz, her face a canvas of shock and embarrassment, looked like she'd been hit by a freight train. Mike, the man I'd once called my best friend, was the picture of guilt. His usual confident demeanor crumbled into dust. "What? How could you do this?" Liz stammered, her voice breaking. "Why here, in front of everyone?" I looked at her, feeling a strange detachment. How could you?" My voice was calm, but inside I was a whirlwind of hurt and anger. She reached out, her hand trembling. Tom, please let me explain. But I was done with explanations. What's there to explain, Liz? The pictures, the videos, they say it all. I turned away, unable to bear the sight of her tears. Mike had already made himself scarce, probably realizing there was nothing he could say or do to fix this. Good riddance. The guests had all but gone, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. Liz was still trying to speak, her words a jumble of excuses and pleas. I never meant to hurt you, it just happened, it wasn't anything serious, she sobbed. I shook my head, it was serious enough to betray our vows, our marriage. The weight of what I was about to say felt like a boulder on my chest. I'm filing for divorce, Liz. The words were out before I could second-guess them. Her cries grew louder, more desperate. But my decision was made. I couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies and deceit. The house, once filled with laughter and love, now echoed with the sound of our broken marriage. I walked away from her, away from the life we had built together. In the following days, I moved like a ghost through our home, packing up my belongings, each item a reminder of a life that was no longer mine. The divorce papers were filed, the process set in motion with an unemotional efficiency. Liz tried to talk, to reconcile, but I couldn't bring myself to hear her out. The trust was shattered, and without trust, what was left? Friends called, offering support, but I found their words hollow. How do you find solace when your world has turned upside down? The house felt empty, even with Liz still there. We moved around each other like strangers, the air thick with unsaid words and unshed tears. As I looked around at the life I was leaving behind, I realized that this was more than just the end of a marriage. It was the end of a chapter, a part of my life that I had to close, no matter how painful it was. I drove away from the house for the last time, my rearview mirror reflecting the life I was leaving behind. Ahead was uncertainty, a road I had to travel alone. But I knew, despite the pain and betrayal, that this was the first step towards rebuilding myself, towards a future where trust and honesty were more than just words. If you've enjoyed what you've seen and want to stay updated with more, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means the world to us and helps us to keep bringing you more of the content you love. Plus, subscribing ensures you won't miss out on any of our future updates. It's a win-win. Thanks for being a part of our community, and we can't wait to share more with you. Keep the likes and comments coming, and remember, every subscribe brings us closer to our next exciting update. So what are you waiting for? Smash that subscribe button and join our growing family. In the wake of my announcement, the room had transformed into a theater of disbelief and murmurs. Some guests looked at me with something akin to respect, nodding silently as if acknowledging the courage it took. Others, their faces a mix of shock and disapproval, whispered among themselves, their eyes darting between Liz, me, and the door where Mike had made his disgraceful exit. It was a surreal tableau, a gathering that had morphed from a cheerful reunion into a scene of domestic tragedy. The air was thick with tension, each person seemingly caught in their own struggle to process what had just unfolded. I can't believe Liz would do something like this, murmured an old friend from college, shaking his head as he clutched a half-empty glass of wine. Others were less sympathetic, their words laced with judgment. I always thought there was something off about her, a cousin declared, a bit too loudly. Liz, her face streaked with tears, was a picture of devastation. She made a feeble attempt to speak to some of the guests, perhaps seeking solace or an ally. But their faces, a mix of pity and discomfort, told a story of a bridge burned too badly to be crossed again.